What happens when an elite professor encounters a black student feeding his blind son on a university bench? Dr. Harrison Whitfield thought he knew exactly what kind of student Marcus Thompson was, until he discovered the shocking truth that would change everything. Some people are afraid of what they don't understand, whispers 8-year-old David, whose innocent wisdom cuts deeper than any academic credential. But when Marcus's true academic brilliance is finally revealed, the professor's world crumbles. This isn't just another story about prejudice, it's about the hidden genius among us, the assumptions that blind us to greatness, and the moment when truth becomes undeniable. You won't believe what Marcus has been hiding, or how dramatically one man's life changes when he finally learns to see. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. The mahogany doors of Economics Hall swung open with a commanding presence as Dr. Harrison Whitfield strode into the lecture hall. At 55, he embodied academic authority, silver hair perfectly styled, Italian suit impeccable, and a reputation that preceded him like a shadow. Students straightened in their seats as his polished shoes clicked against the marble floor. Welcome to Advanced Economic Theory, his voice boomed across the amphitheater. This is not a class for the faint-hearted or the unprepared. I expect excellence, and I deliver nothing less. The heavy doors creaked again. Marcus Thompson slipped inside, quietly taking a seat in the back row. His worn backpack contrasted sharply with the designer bags surrounding him. Dr. Whitfield's eyes tracked the movement, his expression tightening almost imperceptibly. As I was saying, the professor continued, his gaze lingering on Marcus with thinly veiled disdain, this institution maintains certain standards. We don't compromise quality for diversity quotas. Rebecca Morrison, a blonde student in the front row, smirked and whispered to her neighbor. Her designer outfit screamed wealth and privilege, exactly the type of student Dr. Whitfield favored. Marcus pulled out a notebook, its pages already filled with meticulous notes from other classes. He wrote steadily as the professor launched into complex economic theories, his hand moving with practiced efficiency. Economic stratification, Dr. Whitfield declared, is often a reflection of natural capability. Some are simply better equipped for intellectual rigor. The pointed glance toward the back row wasn't lost on anyone. Several students shifted uncomfortably, but Marcus kept writing, his expression unchanged. He'd learned long ago that dignity meant not giving bullies the reaction they craved. As the lecture concluded, Dr. Whitfield gathered his materials with theatrical precision. Remember, gentlemen and ladies, mediocrity has no place in my classroom. Those who don't belong will quickly identify themselves. Marcus packed his notebook carefully, ignoring the stares from his classmates. He had work to get to. The alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m., cutting through the darkness of Marcus's small apartment. He moved quietly, careful not to wake David, who slept peacefully in the bedroom they shared. The 8-year-old's breathing was steady, his small chest rising and falling beneath the thin blanket. Marcus dressed quickly in his janitor's uniform, the first of 3 jobs that kept them afloat. The university's administrative building needed cleaning before the important people arrived, before students like Rebecca Morrison stepped through those polished doors without a second thought about who maintained their pristine environment. By 7 a.m., he'd switched to his student clothes and was sitting in his first class of the day. By noon, exhaustion tugged at his shoulders, but there was no time to rest. David needed lunch. Daddy. The little boy's face lit up as Marcus approached the elementary school. David's fingers found Marcus's hand with practiced ease, his white cane folding as they walked together toward the university campus. They found their usual spot on the wooden bench near the cafeteria. Marcus unpacked the carefully portioned meal, sandwich, apple slices, and a small container of juice. Not much, but nutritious and filling. Tell me about your morning, buddy, Marcus said, guiding David's hands to the food. Mrs. Peterson read us a story about a brave knight. David's face glowed with excitement. He wasn't the strongest, but he was the smartest. Just like you, Daddy. Marcus's throat tightened. If only his son knew how often his father felt anything but brave. Marcus, Mijo, Mrs. Rodriguez appeared beside them, her kind face creased with concern. The cafeteria worker had noticed their daily routine weeks ago. I have extra sandwiches today. Please, take them. Mrs. Rodriguez, I can't. You can, and you will. She pressed a paper bag into his hands. That boy needs good food, and you're a good father. Don't let pride stop you from accepting help. As David finished eating, Marcus checked his watch. 2 hours until his evening shift at Giuseppe's restaurant, where he'd buzz tables until midnight. Then homework, and maybe, if he was lucky, 4 hours of sleep. Why do you work so much, Daddy? David asked, his unseeing eyes turned toward Marcus's voice. So you can have everything you need, son. So you can grow up and be anything you want to be. I want to be like you. Marcus hugged him tight, hoping his son would aim much higher. 3 weeks into the semester, Marcus had established a pattern. Arrive early, sit in the back, take detailed notes, and remain invisible. It was a strategy that had served him well, until the day he made the mistake of raising his hand. Dr. Whitfield was discussing market equilibrium theory, his explanation riddled with oversimplifications that bothered Marcus. The professor painted economic disparities as natural outcomes, ignoring systemic barriers that Marcus knew intimately. Professor, Marcus's voice cut through the lecture hall's stillness. Wouldn't the equilibrium model break down when you factor in artificial constraints like discriminatory lending practices or educational access barriers? The room fell silent. Rebecca Morrison turned in her seat, eyebrows raised in surprise. Other students shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension that suddenly filled the air. Dr. Whitfield's face flushed red. Mr. Thompson, sir. Mr. Thompson. The name dripped with condescension. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but perhaps you should focus on understanding basic concepts before attempting to challenge established theory. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks, but kept his voice steady. I understand the theory, Professor. I'm questioning its real-world application when what? Dr. Whitfield stepped closer to Marcus's row, his voice rising. When someone who clearly doesn't belong in this institution decides to waste everyone's time with pseudo-intellectual posturing. Gasps echoed through the lecture hall. Rebecca snickered openly now, while other students stared at their desks, too uncomfortable to meet Marcus's eyes. The Keynesian model accounts for market failures, Marcus continued quietly, refusing to be silenced. Wouldn't ignoring social factors create incomplete analysis? Dr. Whitfield's laugh was harsh and bitter. Mr. Thompson, I've taught at Harvard, Yale, and Oxford. I've published 17 peer-reviewed papers. You're suggesting I don't understand economic theory? I'm suggesting the theory might be more complex than enough. The professor's voice boomed. This is exactly the problem with lowering admission standards. Students who are clearly out of their depth waste time that could be spent on actual learning. Marcus's hands gripped his notebook so tightly his knuckles turned white. Around him, the silence was deafening. He could feel dozens of eyes on him, could sense the mixture of pity and discomfort from his classmates. Class dismissed, Dr. Whitfield announced abruptly. Perhaps some of you will use the extra time to ensure you're actually prepared for next week's discussion. As students filed out, many avoiding Marcus's gaze, Rebecca lingered near the professor's desk. Some people just don't know their place, she said, loud enough for Marcus to hear. Marcus packed his materials slowly, his hands steady despite the humiliation burning in his chest. He had to pick up David soon, had to put on a smile and pretend this hadn't happened. But as he walked toward the door, he caught Dr. Whitfield watching him with an expression of smug satisfaction. The war had begun. Dr. Whitfield adjusted his silk tie as he crossed the campus courtyard, his thoughts occupied with the prestigious conference invitation he'd received that morning. His reputation as an uncompromising academic was earning him recognition in the right circles, exactly where he belonged. The sight ahead made him pause mid-stride. On the weathered wooden bench near the cafeteria, that Thompson student was carefully unwrapping a sandwich, speaking softly to a small boy beside him. The child's white cane leaned against the bench, and his unseeing eyes turned toward Marcus's voice with complete trust. "Here you go, buddy," Marcus was saying, guiding David's hands to the food. "Mrs. Rodriguez packed extra cookies today." Dr. Whitfield's lip curled in disgust. So this was why the boy couldn't focus in class. He was bringing his personal problems to campus. The university was an institution of higher learning, not a daycare center. He approached with his characteristic authoritative stride. "Mr. Thompson." Marcus looked up, his body tensing immediately. "Professor Whitfield." "I wasn't aware the university had become a family gathering place." The professor's voice carried across the courtyard, drawing curious glances from passing students. "Perhaps you're confused about appropriate boundaries between personal and academic spaces." David's small hand found Marcus's arm, sensing the tension in his father's voice. "Daddy, who is that?" "This is my professor, David." Marcus's voice remained steady, protective. "Professor, this is my son, David." Dr. Whitfield barely glanced at the child. "Your domestic arrangements are irrelevant to me, Mr. Thompson. What concerns me is students who clearly have divided priorities affecting their academic performance." Mrs. Rodriguez emerged from the cafeteria, her face flushed with indignation. "Excuse me, Professor," she interrupted, her accent thick with emotion. "This young man works harder than anyone I've seen. He's here every day, taking care of his son, going to classes, working 3 jobs. I didn't ask for your opinion," Dr. Whitfield cut her off dismissively. "Staff should focus on their duties rather than involving themselves in student affairs." "My duties include caring about good people," Mrs. Rodriguez fired back. "And Marcus is the best person I know." Dr. Whitfield's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Thompson, I suggest you find more appropriate childcare arrangements. This institution has standards to maintain." David's small voice broke the tension. "Why is he angry, Daddy? Did we do something wrong?" Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "No, son. We didn't do anything wrong." "Indeed," Dr. Whitfield said coldly. "Though some people seem incapable of recognizing when they're simply out of place." He turned and walked away, leaving Marcus holding his son closer, Mrs. Rodriguez shaking her head in disgust, and David asking questions that no 8-year-old should have to ask. Dr. Sarah Chen's office was a sanctuary of organized chaos, psychology journals stacked beside family photos, academic awards sharing space with student artwork. She spread Marcus's latest assignment across her desk, reading it for the 3rd time with growing amazement. The paper analyzed economic inequality through a psychological lens, weaving together complex theories with real-world applications. The research was graduate-level, the writing sophisticated, the insights profound. Yet the student who'd written it was being systematically humiliated in Whitfield's classroom. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Marcus entered hesitantly, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Dr. Chen. You wanted to see me about my paper." "Sit down, Marcus." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "This work is exceptional. Truly exceptional. Where did you develop this level of analytical skill?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I've always been interested in economics, ma'am." "This goes beyond interest. This demonstrates mastery." She leaned forward. "Tell me about your background." For a moment, Marcus was quiet, his hands clasped in his lap. Then, as if making a decision, he began to speak. "I graduated summa cum laude from Howard University. Full academic scholarship. I was accepted to PhD programs at 3 universities, including here." His voice was barely above a whisper. "But then David was born, and his mother, she left. I couldn't abandon him for graduate school." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. You were accepted to our PhD program 2 years ago. I deferred enrollment to work and save money. When I finally applied as an undergraduate transfer, they accepted me again, but... He trailed off. But what? I learned to keep my head down. When professors discover you're not what they expected, sometimes it's better to stay invisible. Dr. Chen thought of her elderly neighbor, James Butler, who often spoke of mentoring a brilliant young man in his building. Marcus, do you know James Butler? Marcus's face lit up for the first time. Mr. Butler. He's been like a grandfather to David and me. He taught college mathematics for 40 years. He's the one who encouraged me to pursue economics, showed me how numbers can tell stories about justice and inequality. He's mentioned you. Said you had one of the finest minds he'd ever encountered. Marcus looked down at his hands. Mr. Butler believes in people. Maybe sometimes too much. Or maybe, Dr. Chen said quietly, other people believe in them too little. As Marcus left her office, Dr. Chen remained at her desk, staring at his paper. She'd seen academic brilliance before, but rarely paired with such humility and grace under pressure. Something had to be done about Harrison Whitfield's treatment of this exceptional young man. The assignment had taken Marcus 3 sleepless nights to complete. While David slept, he'd researched, analyzed, and crafted an economic model that addressed urban poverty through innovative policy solutions. It was his best work, comprehensive, original, and academically rigorous. Today we'll hear presentations on your policy proposals, Dr. Whitfield announced, his eyes scanning the lecture hall with customary authority. Miss Morrison, you'll present first. Rebecca approached the podium with confidence, her designer heels clicking against the floor. Her presentation was polished but superficial, a regurgitation of existing theories with minimal original thinking. She spoke for exactly the required 10 minutes, her PowerPoint slides professionally formatted but lacking substance. Excellent work, Miss Morrison, Dr. Whitfield beamed. Your analysis of tax incentives shows sophisticated understanding of market mechanisms. Well done. Rebecca's smile was radiant as she returned to her seat, basking in the professor's approval. Mr. Thompson, you're next. Marcus's heart hammered as he walked to the front. His presentation materials were simple, no fancy slides, just handwritten charts and carefully prepared notes. But his research was groundbreaking. He began speaking, his voice gaining strength as he outlined his comprehensive approach to economic inequality. He'd identified overlooked correlations between educational access, transportation infrastructure, and employment opportunities. His proposed solutions were innovative, practical, and backed by solid mathematical modeling. The room fell silent as Marcus concluded. Even Rebecca looked surprised by the depth and originality of his work. Dr. Whitfield's face, however, was a mask of cold skepticism. Mr. Thompson, this is quite ambitious for an undergraduate. Perhaps too ambitious. Sir. I'm curious about your research methodology. These statistical analyses seem sophisticated for someone of your background. The implication hung heavy in the air. Marcus felt the familiar heat rising in his cheeks. I conducted primary research through community surveys and community surveys. Dr. Whitfield's laugh was sharp. Mr. Thompson, real economic research requires access to institutional databases, advanced statistical software, peer review processes. Are you suggesting you accomplished graduate-level analysis from your community? I used publicly available data and, did you receive help with this work? The question cut through the lecture hall like a blade. The silence was deafening. Every student stared, sensing the accusation beneath the professor's words. Marcus's hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. Every word is my own work, Professor. Interesting. Dr. Whitfield's smile was cold. Because this level of analysis typically requires years of advanced training. Perhaps you'd like to explain how someone with your background managed such sophisticated economic modeling. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Around him, students shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Rebecca's expression mixed shock with something that looked like satisfaction. "I've always been interested in economics," Marcus said quietly. "Interest doesn't create expertise, Mr. Thompson. I've seen this before, students who overreach, who submit work beyond their capabilities, hoping no one will notice the discrepancy." Marcus stood at the podium, his exceptional work spread before him, while his professor systematically destroyed his credibility in front of 30 students. His chest felt tight, his throat constricted, but he refused to let them see him break. "I understand your concerns, Professor," he said finally, his dignity intact despite the humiliation. "Perhaps we could discuss this further during office hours." Dr. Whitfield waved dismissively. Class dismissed. Remember, authenticity is crucial in academic work. Pretending to be something you're not ultimately serves no one. As students filed out, many avoiding Marcus's gaze, he gathered his materials with steady hands. The presentation that should have showcased his brilliance had become another moment of public humiliation. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet resolve was building. He was tired of being invisible. Tired of being underestimated. It was time for the truth to emerge. Dr. Sarah Chen's heels clicked purposefully down the marble corridor leading to Dean Patricia Williams' office. The folder in her hands contained evidence that could no longer be ignored: Marcus Thompson's academic records, his assignment samples, and documentation of Professor Whitfield's behavior. "Sarah, come in," Dean Williams gestured toward the chair across from her desk. At 62, the dean had built her reputation on fairness and academic integrity. Her office walls displayed degrees from prestigious institutions alongside photographs of diverse student achievements. "Patricia, we have a serious problem." Dr. Chen placed the folder on the desk. "It's about Harrison Whitfield and his treatment of Marcus Thompson." Dean Williams' expression grew concerned as she opened the folder. Her eyes widened as she examined Marcus's transcripts from Howard University, summa cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, Academic Achievement Awards, published undergraduate research. "This student was accepted to our PhD program," she asked, reviewing the admission documents. 2 years ago. He deferred for personal reasons, then reapplied as an undergraduate transfer." Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Patricia, this young man has one of the most impressive academic records I've seen, yet Whitfield is systematically humiliating him in class." The dean continued reading, her frown deepening. "These assignment samples are graduate-level work. The analysis is sophisticated, original." She looked up. "What exactly is Whitfield doing?" Dr. Chen detailed the classroom incidents, the public accusations of academic dishonesty, the dismissive comments about Marcus's background and capabilities. "Yesterday, he essentially accused Marcus of cheating in front of the entire class." "Based on what evidence?" "Based on the assumption that someone of Marcus's background couldn't produce such high-quality work." Dean Williams closed the folder, her jaw set. "Contact Mrs. Rodriguez from the cafeteria. I want to hear her observations about this student." An hour later, Mrs. Rodriguez sat in the dean's office, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "That boy works harder than anyone I've ever seen," she said, her voice thick with emotion. 3 jobs, caring for his blind son, never misses class. And always polite, always grateful. "Tell me about his interactions with other students," Dean Williams prompted. "They don't talk to him much. But I see him helping them sometimes, explaining things, sharing his notes when someone was absent. He's got a good heart, that one." After Mrs. Rodriguez left, Dean Williams turned to Dr. Chen. "I'm calling Marcus Thompson in for a meeting. And I'm reviewing every complaint about Professor Whitfield's classroom behavior. Patricia, there's something else." Dr. Chen's voice was quiet. "I've heard similar stories from other students. Whitfield seems to have a pattern of targeting students who don't fit his preferences." Dean Williams reached for her phone. "Then it's time to address this pattern directly." As she dialed Marcus's number, both women knew they were about to uncover something much larger than one professor's prejudice. They were about to expose a system that had allowed such behavior to flourish unchecked. The investigation had begun. The evening light filtered through the thin curtains of their small apartment as Marcus helped David with his Braille homework. The 8-year-old's fingers moved across the raised dots with practiced ease, reading a story about friendship and courage. "Daddy," David said suddenly, his small hands pausing on the page. "Why was that man mean to you today?" Marcus's heart tightened. He'd hoped David hadn't understood the tension during their encounter with Professor Whitfield, but his son's perception was remarkable. Blindness had sharpened his other senses, including his ability to read emotions. "Some people judge others based on how they look or where they come from," Marcus said carefully, choosing his words, "instead of getting to know who they really are inside." David's face scrunched in concentration. "But that's silly. You can't see someone's heart with your eyes." "You're absolutely right, buddy. Mrs. Peterson says some people are afraid of what they don't understand." David's voice was matter-of-fact, wise beyond his years. "Maybe that man is afraid." Marcus studied his son's face, so innocent, yet so perceptive. "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that you're smarter than him." David's words hung in the air with startling clarity. "Tommy at school used to be mean to me because I could do math problems faster than him, even though I can't see. Then Mrs. Peterson talked to him, and now we're friends." A soft knock interrupted their conversation. Marcus opened the door to find James Butler, their elderly neighbor, holding a plate of homemade cookies. "Evening, Marcus. Thought you boys might enjoy these." At 78, Mr. Butler moved slowly but his mind remained sharp as ever. He'd been a mathematics professor for 4 decades before retirement. "Mr. Butler." David's face lit up. "Did you bring the chess set?" "Of course, young man." The elderly man's eyes twinkled as he set up the board. David had learned to play chess by touch, and his strategic thinking amazed everyone who played with him. As David focused on the game, Mr. Butler pulled Marcus aside. "Sarah Chen told me about what's happening with that professor." Marcus tensed. "Dr. Chen shouldn't have. She's concerned about you, son." "We all are." Mr. Butler's voice was gentle but firm. "I've seen this before, Marcus. 40 years in academia taught me that some people can't see past their own prejudices." "I can handle it, Mr. Butler." "I know you can. But the question is, should you have to?" The old man's eyes were serious. "Sometimes standing up isn't just about you. Sometimes it's about all the students who'll come after you." David's voice carried from the chessboard. "Checkmate, Mr. Butler." The elderly professor chuckled. "This boy has his father's brilliant mind." He turned back to Marcus. "Don't let anyone convince you that brilliance has a color, son. Truth is truth, regardless of who speaks it." After Mr. Butler left, Marcus tucked David into bed. As he pulled the covers up, his son's small hand found his. "Daddy, you're the smartest person I know. Don't let anyone make you forget that." Marcus kissed his forehead, struck by the wisdom of an 8-year-old who couldn't see but understood everything that mattered. That night, as he worked on his assignments, Marcus made a decision. He was tired of hiding his light under a bushel. It was time to let his brilliance shine, regardless of who felt threatened by it. Dean Williams' office felt smaller with Professor Whitfield's imposing presence filling the space. He sat across from her desk, his expression ranging from confusion to indignation as she opened Marcus Thompson's file. "Harrison, I need to discuss your treatment of one of your students." Her voice was professional but firm. "If this is about Thompson, I can assure you my assessments are based solely on academic merit." His tone carried the authority of someone unaccustomed to being questioned. "Let me share some information about Mr. Thompson's academic merit." Dean Williams spread Marcus's transcripts across her desk. "Summa cum laude from Howard University. Phi Beta Kappa. Published undergraduate research in the Journal of Economic Perspectives. Professor Whitfield's confident expression flickered slightly as he leaned forward to examine the documents. He was accepted to our doctoral program 2 years ago with full funding. Dean Williams continued, her voice steady. His GRE scores, 98th percentile in quantitative reasoning, 96th percentile in analytical writing. The color began draining from Professor Whitfield's face as the implications sank in. Furthermore, Dr. Chen added, entering the office with additional files, his undergraduate thesis on urban economic development won the Howard University Distinguished Research Award. It's been cited in 17 peer-reviewed papers. Professor Whitfield stared at the documents, his hands trembling slightly. This must be some mistake. No mistake, Harrison. Dean Williams' voice was cold. The mistake was your assumption that academic excellence has a particular appearance. But his presentation style, his questions in class, they seemed. Professor Whitfield's voice trailed off as he realized how his words sounded. Seemed what? Too sophisticated for someone who looks like him. Dr. Chen's question hung in the air like an accusation. The professor's face went pale. I would never base my judgment on. On what, Harrison? Dean Williams leaned forward. On race? On socioeconomic background? Because that's exactly what you've been doing. Professor Whitfield's hands shook as he examined Marcus's published research paper. The mathematical modeling was elegant, the economic analysis was groundbreaking, and the implications for policy were profound. This wasn't just graduate-level work, it was the kind of innovative thinking that defined academic excellence. I don't understand, he whispered. If he's this qualified, why is he in undergraduate classes? Why was he working as a janitor? Because life isn't as simple as your privileged perspective assumes, Dean Williams replied sharply. Mr. Thompson is a single father raising a blind child. He deferred his doctoral studies to provide for his son. He works multiple jobs to survive while pursuing his education. The weight of his misjudgments crashed down on Professor Whitfield like a tsunami. Every dismissive comment, every public humiliation, every assumption about Marcus's capabilities had been grotesquely wrong. 3 jobs, Harrison, Dr. Chen added quietly. Janitor, restaurant worker, and part-time tutor. All while maintaining a 4.0 GPA and caring for his son. Professor Whitfield slumped in his chair, the folder of Marcus's achievements spread before him like evidence of his own moral failure. What have I done? You've revealed your true character, Dean Williams said simply. The question now is what you intend to do about it. Professor Whitfield found himself walking toward the familiar bench near the cafeteria, his steps slower than usual. 3 days had passed since Dean Williams had shattered his assumptions about Marcus Thompson, and he hadn't slept properly since. The file of Marcus's achievements sat on his desk like a monument to his own prejudice. He stopped short when he saw them, Marcus sitting patiently beside David, who was working through a complex math problem on a braille slate. The 8-year-old's fingers moved with precision as he calculated, his face scrunched in concentration. Carry the 2, remember. Marcus guided gently. Oh. That makes it 847. David's face lit up with understanding. Excellent. Now try this one. Marcus wrote another problem in braille. If a train travels 85 miles per hour for 3.5 hours, how far does it travel? Professor Whitfield watched, transfixed, as David worked through the multiplication, his small hands moving across the dots with mathematical fluency. The child was solving problems that many high school students would struggle with. 297.5 miles. David announced proudly. Perfect. You're ready for algebra next year. Marcus's voice carried such pride, such gentle encouragement. Daddy, can you show me that economic thing again? The one about supply and demand? Professor Whitfield's breath caught as Marcus began explaining market dynamics to his 8-year-old son, using simple analogies but maintaining economic accuracy. The explanation was clearer than most graduate-level textbooks, demonstrating a mastery of the subject that went far beyond mere memorization. "Mr. Thompson." The professor's voice cracked slightly as he approached. Marcus tensed immediately, his body shifting to shield David. "Professor Whitfield." "Daddy, is that the angry man?" David's small voice carried clearly in the afternoon air. The words hit Professor Whitfield like physical blows. An 8-year-old blind child knew him as the angry man. The shame was overwhelming. I wanted to speak with you." Professor Whitfield's usual commanding presence had vanished, replaced by hesitant uncertainty. "David, why don't you practice your Braille reading?" Marcus handed his son a book, his protective instincts clearly activated. Professor Whitfield sat heavily on the far end of the bench, maintaining distance. "I owe you an apology, Mr. Thompson." A profound, inadequate apology. Marcus remained silent, his jaw set. "I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong." The professor's voice was barely above a whisper. "Dean Williams showed me your academic record. Your achievements. Your brilliance. Brilliance you couldn't see because of how I look." Marcus's question was quiet but cutting. Professor Whitfield's face crumpled. "Yes. God help me, yes." He looked at David, who was listening intently despite pretending to read. "I've spent my career believing in meritocracy, in objective standards. But I was never objective. I was everything I claimed to despise. Why now? Why tell me this now? Because watching you teach your son just now, seeing the patience, the intelligence, the love." Professor Whitfield's voice broke. "I realized I've been blind to everything that actually matters. Your son may not see with his eyes, but he sees your heart. I've had perfect vision my entire life, and I've seen nothing." David's small voice cut through the tension. "Daddy, is he sorry?" Marcus looked at his son, then at the broken man beside him. "Yes, buddy. I think he is." Professor Whitfield wiped his eyes, struggling to compose himself. "Mr. Thompson, I want to make this right. I want to recommend you for our doctoral program, with full funding. Your work deserves recognition, not ridicule. And what about the other students like me? The ones who come after?" Professor Whitfield met his gaze directly. "Then I have much more work to do than just apologizing to you." For the first time since the conversation began, Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Thank you, Professor. For seeing me. Finally." As they sat together on that bench, the brilliant young father, his wise son, and the humbled professor, something fundamental shifted in the afternoon light. Understanding had replaced assumptions, respect had conquered prejudice, and perhaps most importantly, a man had found the courage to confront his own darkness. The lecture hall buzzed with nervous energy as students filed in for Professor Whitfield's class. Word had spread about some kind of special announcement, and speculation ran wild. Rebecca Morrison whispered anxiously to her friends, while other students cast curious glances toward the back row where Marcus sat with his usual quiet dignity. Professor Whitfield entered the room differently than before, his steps less commanding, his expression more thoughtful. He set his materials on the podium and looked directly at Marcus before addressing the class. "Today marks an important moment in my teaching career," he began, his voice carrying none of its usual arrogance. "I owe all of you, but particularly one student, a profound apology and a crucial lesson about assumptions." The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. 3 weeks ago, I questioned the academic capabilities of Marcus Thompson. I suggested his work was beyond his background, implying he had received improper assistance. Professor Whitfield's voice grew stronger as he continued. "I was not only wrong, I was disgracefully wrong." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face flushing as she realized where this was heading. "Mr. Thompson graduated summa cum laude from Howard University. He was accepted to our doctoral program with full funding. His undergraduate research has been published in prestigious journals and cited by leading economists worldwide. Each word landed like a hammer blow against the prejudice that had filled this room for weeks. Gasps echoed through the lecture hall. Students turned to stare at Marcus, who sat calmly, his expression unchanged. Furthermore, Professor Whitfield continued, while pursuing his undergraduate degree here, Mr. Thompson maintains a 4.0 GPA while working 3 jobs and raising his blind son as a single father. His dedication to both academic excellence and parental responsibility is nothing short of extraordinary. Dr. Chen slipped into the back of the lecture hall, drawn by reports of what was happening. She watched with pride as her colleague finally acknowledged the truth. I have recommended Mr. Thompson for immediate admission to our doctoral program with full funding and a research assistantship position. Professor Whitfield's voice carried across the stunned classroom. The university has accepted my recommendation enthusiastically. The silence stretched for several seconds before spontaneous applause began, starting with a few students and building until the entire class was clapping. Marcus remained seated, nodding slightly in acknowledgement. Mr. Thompson, Professor Whitfield addressed him directly, would you be willing to share your research on urban economic policy with the class? I believe we could all learn from your insights. Marcus stood slowly, walked to the front of the classroom, and began speaking about economic inequality with the authority and brilliance he'd always possessed but had been denied the opportunity to display. As he outlined his research methodology and findings, Rebecca Morrison slumped in her chair, realizing how much she'd underestimated the quiet man she'd dismissed so easily. Other students leaned forward, genuinely engaged with ideas that challenged everything they thought they knew about economics and opportunity. When Marcus finished, the applause was immediate and sustained. Professor Whitfield shook his hand publicly, a gesture that carried weight beyond mere courtesy. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, he said, using the title that Marcus would soon earn officially. After class, students approached Marcus with genuine interest and respect, asking questions about his research and offering congratulations. The isolation that had defined his academic experience was finally breaking down. Dr. Chen approached Professor Whitfield as students filed out. That took courage, Harrison. It took too long, he replied quietly. But perhaps it's never too late to become the teacher, and the person, you should have been all along. 6 months later, the university's annual research symposium buzzed with excitement as faculty and graduate students presented their work. In the main auditorium, Marcus Thompson stood at the podium, no longer the quiet undergraduate hiding in the back row, but a confident doctoral candidate whose research was garnering national attention. David sat in the front row beside Mr. Butler, his small hands following along with the braille notes Marcus had prepared for him. At 8 years old, he was already showing the same mathematical aptitude as his father, and the university had arranged for him to attend special enrichment programs designed for gifted children with visual impairments. My research on urban economic mobility, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed auditorium, challenges traditional assumptions about poverty and opportunity. The data reveals systemic barriers that previous models have ignored. Professor Whitfield sat in the audience, no longer the arrogant authority figure who had dismissed Marcus months earlier. The transformation had been profound. He'd spent the semester examining his teaching methods, his unconscious biases, and his responsibility as an educator. His classroom had become a model of inclusive excellence, where all students were encouraged to reach their potential regardless of their background. Mrs. Rodriguez beamed from her seat near the back, having received a special invitation to attend. She'd watched Marcus's journey from the beginning, offering food and encouragement when both were desperately needed. Now she witnessed his triumph with the pride of someone who had always believed in his potential. Dean Williams nodded approvingly as Marcus presented his findings. The university had already received inquiries from policymakers interested in implementing his recommendations for urban development programs. What had started as a doctoral dissertation was becoming a blueprint for social change. In conclusion, Marcus said, his presentation drawing to a close, economic mobility isn't just about individual effort, it's about creating systems that recognize and develop human potential wherever it exists. The standing ovation was immediate and sustained. As applause filled the auditorium, David stood too, his face glowing with pride for his father. After the presentation, Marcus was surrounded by faculty members, policy experts, and fellow graduate students. But his first stop was David, whom he swept into a gentle hug. "How did I do, buddy?" "You were perfect, Daddy. Just like always." Professor Whitfield approached them, his expression humble. "Marcus, that was extraordinary. The policy implications alone." "Thank you, Professor." Marcus's voice held no trace of resentment, only professional respect. "Your recommendation made all this possible." "No," Professor Whitfield shook his head. "Your brilliance made this possible. I just finally learned to see it." As the evening wound down, Marcus walked across campus with David, past the bench where they'd shared so many simple lunches, past the buildings where he'd once worked as a janitor, toward a future bright with possibility. The little boy who had been known as the angry man's target was gone. In his place stood a young scholar whose research would influence policy, whose teaching would inspire students, and whose example would remind everyone that excellence comes in many forms. David's small hand found his father's as they walked. "Daddy, what happens next?" Marcus smiled, looking up at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. "Next, we keep learning, keep growing, and keep proving that dreams don't have limits." Behind them, the university glowed with lights from classrooms where other students, from all backgrounds, all circumstances, were discovering their own potential. And in one of those classrooms, Professor Whitfield was preparing lessons that would ensure no student would ever again be judged by anything other than the content of their character and the depth of their ideas. The transformation was complete. Justice had prevailed. And hope had won. Dear friend, this story reminds us that brilliance exists in every community, every background, and every circumstance. Too often, we judge others by appearance rather than character, by assumptions rather than truth. Marcus Thompson's journey shows us that genius can wear janitor's clothes, wisdom can come from unexpected places, and the most profound lessons often come from those we've overlooked. Every day, countless individuals face barriers not because they lack ability, but because others lack vision to see their potential. Let's commit to looking deeper, listening closer, and recognizing the extraordinary among the ordinary. If this story touched your heart and opened your mind, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can share stories that challenge prejudice, celebrate human dignity, and inspire positive change in our communities.